Hello and welcome back to a festive splash of paint brought to you in association with the SAA. Let's go and pull a Christmas cracker with Fraser Scarfe as he demonstrates the simple techniques to give your final painting a nice professional finish.
Today I'm going to show you how I glaze my paintings when I finish them. It's not something you have to do with acrylic paint by any means, but it often gives you a nice kind of final finish and a nice kind of professional glossy look if you're after that sort of thing. So I've got a painting here and I just want to sort of give it that final lift by giving it a once over with some varnish. Now the varnish I'm using is the gloss medium and varnish. You can use sort of most varnishes on acrylic, but I use this one because it sort of ties in nicely with the paints that I use. First thing I'm going to do is just pour a bit of my varnish out into a lid here, so I've got a sort of pool of it. Now, normally if I was varnishing a picture like this, I'd lay it down flat just to stop any drips or anything, but I think if I work quick enough, I'll be able to show you the idea here. Now, two things you need to be careful about when you're sort of doing a final varnish. Firstly, you really need a sort of clean, dry brush here that hasn't got any sort of leftover colour from anything else you might have been doing. Because what we want obviously is a nice clear layer of varnish. It's also worth checking that there's no sort of dust or specks or anything on your canvas that might get trapped in the varnish or anything like that. So I've got my varnish here and it's quite simply just going to be a case of getting a good load of this on my brush and then just applying it in even strokes across the surface of your picture. This varnish is a sort of white milky colour out of the bottle, but sort of don't panic, it always dries clear. So, you know, if it has a slightly sort of bluey, milky tinge when you apply it to the board, it will dry completely transparent. So don't worry if you're a bit concerned when you start running these bluey, milky lines over your finished painting. So I'm just taking sweeps of the brush all the way across the canvas there. And then having done that, all you want to do is just leave it somewhere to dry for an hour or two so it's completely dry. And if you want to, you can reapply layers of varnish depending on the sort of look you want. But I usually find once I've finished an acrylic painting, just one layer of gloss varnish like that just helps to lift it and tie everything together in a more professional way.
Thanks Fraser, really shows how glazes can really enhance the luminosity of your colours and give a boost to your final finished painting. Now we've just got time to squeeze in another little treat. Let's pop over and join popular watercolour artist Geoff Kerseys with another rock solid piece of artistic inspiration.
I've drawn a couple of rocks here as part of the landscape and just dropped a simple sky behind them and a bit of dark green to give us a bit of colour to contrast with the light cast onto the rock itself. The first thing I'm going to do is just take the masking fluid off the furthest rock, at the moment leaving it on the one in front of it. So you need to do that carefully so you don't disturb the masking fluid on the nearest rock. Now that shape isn't as neat and tidy as I wanted it to be, so I can just take a number 2 brush and a bit more of that rich dark green mixture I used in the background and can just tidy up the shape a bit. And then with a damp, clean brush, I'm softening that dark green into the previous colour there. I'm just going to pick up the number 8 brush and mix some colours. I find that with rocks, it's all about getting a light and a dark side to them to make them look three-dimensional. So I'm starting with a touch of raw sienna with just a hint of burnt sienna in it to warm it slightly. Then a bit of shadow colour. I'm going to take a bit of cobalt blue with a touch of rose madder. I think we'll have a hint of green in the rock, so I'm going to take a little bit of lemon yellow, and that's not exactly green, but when I get it with that shadow colour on the paper, it will turn a bit green. And then for the darkest part of the rock, the furthest away from the light, I want a rich, strong dark, so I'm taking burnt sienna with some ultramarine blue. Okay, now, so I need a bit smaller brush, a number 6. The light's coming from the right-hand side, so I've got that raw sienna with a touch of burnt sienna in it, and I'm dropping that in at the right-hand side of the rock. touch of water to make it even paler, nearest to the light. And I'm taking that over the whole of the rock area. And then at the left-hand side, which is away from the light, I've got that purpley colour, the cobalt blue with a touch of rose madder, and we'll put that in. Just letting it soften into the previous colour, which turns it slightly grey. Right, now going back to the raw sienna and burnt sienna, I'm reddening it slightly with a touch more burnt sienna, and we'll put a bit of that in to soften those colours in together. Before adding a bit of the lemon yellow to give it a slightly green tint. It's always a good idea with rocks to indicate that there's a bit of moss or lichen on them with a touch of lemon yellow. I'm cleaning the brush and drying it before I pick up the rich dark brown for the strongest shadows. Put that over at this left-hand side and work it in, letting the colours soften into each other. Bringing the dark down towards the ground. I'm particularly concentrating the dark around the light side of the next stone, so that the dark of one stone picks out the light of the one next to it. Now I'm going to take a bit more lemon yellow, and while the rock is still wet, and this is quite an important tip, while the rock is still wet, I'm dropping in a bit of lemon yellow around the base of it, which softens up into the dark of the rock and gives the impression of grass growing around the base of it. Because the lemon yellow, when it gets the dark brown mixed in with it, goes a sort of bright green colour. Touch more lemon yellow down here. And now I'm going to mix a bit of bright green with Oriolin, the touch of cobalt blue, and drop that in. Around the base of the rock, just letting those colours creep in. I've now picked up the number 2 fine detailer brush, and I'm getting a bit more lemon yellow on it. This is quite a thick paint, straight out of the tube really, this. And I'm just going to suggest a few grasses growing up into the dark there with that opaque lemon yellow before I leave it to dry. Now that that rock's dry, I'm picking up the number 2 brush again, getting a bit of that shadow colour, the cobalt blue and rose madder, and I want to just put a suggestion of texture onto the rock using the rough surface of the paper, just to sort of loosen it up a bit, make it look more rock-like. And with some of the dark brown, the burnt sienna and ultramarine, just 1 or 2 cracks and crevices, just things that make it look a bit more irregular and textured. And with a damp clean brush, soften 1 or 2 of those marks before we go on to the next rock. So I'm removing the masking fluid, and you can see now how I've got a nice bright area to contrast the light of that rock with the dark of the one behind it. So I can go straight away into this rock with the number 8 brush and some more of that same mixture of raw sienna with a little touch of burnt sienna. Putting that into the light side. A bit of clean water to make it lightest nearest to the dark next to it. This is what we call counter change, where we get a rich dark next to a real bright colour, give it contrast. The shadowy colour, again more over to the left-hand shadowed side of the rock. More of that raw sienna and burnt sienna. I think a touch of lemon yellow again to give us a hint of maybe a bit of lichen or moss on it. And then with the smaller brush, the number 2, I've got the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, just like I used on the dark side of the rock behind it. This makes up the dark shadowy side of this one. It's not just the dark shadow side, it's down at the base of the rock as well, where it meets the grasses, to give us a good contrast there as well. I think a touch more of the purpley colour, the cobalt blue and rose madder. And then again, I'm picking up the lemon yellow, still with the number 2 brush, and floating that into the dark to give the impression of grasses and weeds growing around the base of the rock. A little bit of water to soften that in. And I've got a bit bigger brush, I'm going back to the number 8, and that green mixture of aureolin and a touch of cobalt blue to put a bright green for the grass around the base of the rock. A little bit of raw sienna in there as well. And I think a lot of that dark has drained down into the green, so I need to put a bit more of that rich dark brown in. That's the burnt sienna and ultramarine. A few marks and suggesting a few cracks into it. Still with the number 2 brush, I'm getting some neat lemon yellow and suggesting a few grasses. Taking advantage again of the fact that the lemon yellow is opaque. So that's the rocks completed. I think an important lesson to take from this one is how I've used the dark of one rock next to the light of the one next to it. And this is called counterchange, where we put a light next to a dark to give us a real contrast, and this puts a real boost into your paintings. The method I've just shown you on those 2 rocks is exactly the same as I've used carried through to all this mass of rocks on a hillside here in Derbyshire. You can see again where the dark of one rock is used to pick out the light of the one in front of it. And also look how each time I've painted a bit of grass or foreground in front of the rock, I've let it soften into the rock itself, into the shadowy area. This means that we've got a real contrast of hard edges and soft edges right throughout the scene.
Thanks, Geoff. A nice little project there for you to experiment with. And remember, we're always keen to see examples of your work. Why not upload them on the community section of the SAA website? Just visit saa.co.uk for details. Well, folks, as I continue to browse through the latest SAA Home Shop catalogue for some last-minute gift ideas, it's time for our final break. But join us in part 4 when SAA professional artist Marion Dutton puts the final finishing touches to today's Try Your Hand at Oils in Bloom project. And I'll be dipping into the splashy paint seasonal stockings to help solve some more of your artistic dilemmas. We'll see you soon.